She's saying that that's not the reason. It was mentioned, and I think there's a little bit of shame for her on just admitting that because she knows how does that make me look, and also knowing that's one of Patrick's wounds. Hi, I'm Jody, a relationship and therapist based in Southern California, and I'm going to be continuing my Love is Blind series. Today we're going to be focusing on Kacie and Patrick. Of course, we're gonna have to also mention Anna and Blake because this was like a whole square thing going on. It was very complicated. So let's jump in. I'm first gonna start with Anna and Patrick because I feel like they were the beginning story. Anna and Patrick were kind of there for Kacie and Patrick. Kacie and Patrick were hanging out. Anna was the one for Patrick in the beginning. Their story basically was they met, they were getting along, they ended up realizing that both of them were Asian and kind of admitted that that wasn't usually what they went for. They were kind of acknowledging, this is odd. I don't usually date other Asian people, but they couldn't deny the connection and like how their values and things were aligning. That can just be, hey, similar person, similar person. From my experience, both personal and professional, you really can't undercut the value of culture, what it's like to be with a person who gets it, who understands your family, who understands what your upbringing has been like, expectations. Even if you have people of different cultures that are like in the United States, for example, we have our United States culture, but then we also have maybe where our people came from, especially when you have a culture like Asian, where it's probably more likely that they have immigrated more recently than, let's say, like my family. I don't even know when we came. Like we were in New York and Ellis Island, so we don't even know. We're so far gone from that culture versus oftentimes when I meet Latino or Asian and some other cultures, like it's usually a little more prominent. There's more of a connection to it. They might have family members that don't speak English or who have come over maybe recently or only like a generation or two ago. And so there tends to be a little bit more of that going on. I think that made sense why they were connecting over that because they just had so many shared experiences, even though they came from different families. The relationship and life that they would have had, there's just things that made sense to them. Even when you're meeting somebody, not only with a family, but even with them, how long have they been here? You have some people that are more rooted in that culture and some that aren't. Some people are a little bit more westernized. You can barely tell if you didn't see their physical appearance where they might be from versus there are some people that it's much more kind of ingrained in how they are, in how they navigate life. I understood all that. Anna had a meltdown, started freaking out. There was potentially like some component of that, like that had to do with like family. Sure, that's understandable. Concerns on what her family might have thought. But overall, it was kind of the sentiment was just really noticing, hey, maybe I'm not ready. That's all fine and good. My main issue was this is kind of something that you often will see a little bit more when someone has more of an avoidant attachment style is when they get overwhelmed, they disappear, they run, they distance. And that is something that I didn't prefer on how Anna handled it. Of course, I don't know all the information. I don't know what production was like. I don't know how that was edited. Basically, what you saw on the show was she just disappeared. And she had both Patrick and Blake that she was seeing, and both of them took it really badly. Blake even left the show. He was like, I don't know how to take this. I don't know where to go from here. That was the only person that I was connecting with. Now I have no purpose to be here. And Patrick also kind of felt the same, but Patrick did end up moving on. I can't really promote responding that way. Again, we all get overwhelmed, but I think we do kind of owe people we've been seeing, if it's allowed, again, production allowed it to happen, I imagine they would, but I don't know, to just give people a heads up, right? We all have abandonment traumas, fears, and let's not poke those. And that's a great way to do it, is just, I'm going to disappear off the face of the earth. You're never going to know what happened or what could have been, or there's not going to be any conversation about it for a while. And I just didn't really care for how that played out. And then you had Patrick and Anna talk at one of the parties where they were able to get some closure and actually have a conversation about what happened. I've seen some videos where they're kind of bashing on Anna a little bit. I didn't see it that way. I thought that the way that she handled it was very appropriate, and she was honest because Patrick was like, well, I would have chose you. No. I'm like, but Patrick, you did move on and then went with somebody else. Of course, that's based on circumstance, but you can understand how somebody would be confused to say, well, you were the one for me. Okay, well, you seem to find somebody else, no problem. So what? And I think that's really what she was highlighting. I don't think he had like a lot of insight of how he was handling it. Like Blake, for example, he knew. And I'm not here to promote we have one person ever, and once that person's gone, life sucks. I do feel like there was something maybe to look at on how Patrick handled that and how quickly all of a sudden he was like, Kacie, now I'm all about Kacie. I like that she was bringing that up. Switching over to Patrick, right? Patrick had shared these past wounds about wanting to be accepted for who he is, not about his appearance, not about his Asian appearance or culture. I definitely could understand where that's coming from. I think for most of the time that humans have been around, well, at least I could say maybe more recent, I could see where he's coming, where like, Asian males, they were not seen or as attractive to like westernized culture. I think now that that has been more normalized and you have like K-pop and things like that that are more popular, now some people are like, ooh, they're hot, but we kind of had to be told that they were. I think that definitely I understood where he was coming from with that. Well, that really sucks to feel like you're being judged based on your appearances and what is considered attractive, which really sucks when you're like, hey, I just want to be loved as a normal person, you know, like an average person. Can you look inside? Love is blind completely? Probably not. And it sucks because some of that might be, hey, is it the right circumstance? Maybe once I already thought these other things were okay, maybe then I would have found you attractive, which just sucks and is sad. I always found Patrick as a very quirky guy, trying to figure out like how he communicated and like what was kind of going on internally for him at times was a little bit confusing. That's just something I wanted to kind of throw out there that I thought was really interesting about Patrick. I think kind of contributed to maybe some of like the confusion. What do you mean? You're saying I'm the one, but then when I left, you immediately married somebody else. What? That brings me to Kacie. Kacie was the one that Patrick was seeing and they got along fine, but he was really honed in on Anna. And then once Anna left, then he kind of had to figure out, well, how do I proceed? And who knows? Oh, I was really even on both, or like I could see a future with Kacie versus, hey, I just actually want to get married. Who knows? Then he went over to Kacie, and we don't really need too much talk about that because they weren't together long. They did get engaged. They had the reveal. There was a little bit of excitement around the reveal, but then also like people were noticing some like a little bit weird stuff. Before going to the resort, Kacie had a meltdown and was basically like very confusing. I think everybody was confused. We all kind of knew that it probably had to do with attraction. She's saying that that's not the reason. It was mentioned, and I think there's a little bit of shame for her on just admitting that because she knows how does that make me look, and also knowing that's one of Patrick's wounds. We all have our different flavors. There's only so much we can do about that. Not everything is going to change. When she met with Patrick, she was all emotional and she was kind of like trying to say that she was done with the relationship, but then she was in the middle of like cuddling and making out with him. And wait, what? What is happening here? I don't understand. And even Patrick was confused. So I really don't think that that was on Patrick. I think that was on Kacie, that she was being so wishy-washy and then she wanted to keep the ring and this and that. And Patrick's like leaving the conversation, but I'll see you later, right? Yeah, we'll continue this and just not go to the resorts. And Kacie was kind of like, yeah, it was very confusing, and I get how it happens, but again, it made it way worse than it needed to be. Rather than just taking some space, being like, I just need to figure it out, I don't know yet. It was just a hot mess. That was them. This whole thing was just a disaster. I hope that they all find happiness, and we'll see where they go from here. Stay tuned, and we're going to talk about somebody else next.